fist crashed down onto a stone table. The whole hall shook. Goblets toppled and rolled off the edge. Wine ran across the floor. 100 wolves dropped their eyes to the ground. Not one of them dared to breathe. At the center, a man rose to his full height. Huge, thick neck. A scar ran from his jaw to his collar. His eyes burned gold, then went black. He looked down at the woman before him, and he spoke the words that end everything in our world. I reject you. Her name was Celine. She did not flinch. She did not cry. She did not beg, the way every rejected mate had begged before her. And the Alpha King who had just thrown her away was about to learn what her silence would cost him. What happens next froze an entire kingdom. Stay with me on this one. To understand what just happened, you have to understand who Celine was, and who she was not. She was not born to the royal line. She was not a warrior. She did not have a famous name or a powerful father standing behind her. In the Iron Moon Pack, she was the healer. The one they called in the middle of the night when a child burned with fever. The one who set broken bones after a hunt went wrong. The one who stayed when everyone else ran. For years, that was her whole life. Quiet work. Long nights. A small room at the edge of the territory, with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and a single moonstone pendant on a cord around her neck. The pendant had been her mother's. It was the only thing she owned that mattered. Now here's the thing about the Iron Moon Pack. They lived and died by one law above all others. The law of the bond. In our world, every wolf has a fated mate. One. The moon chooses. And when two mates stand close enough under a full moon, they feel it. A pull. A heat under the skin. A certainty that goes deeper than thought. The bond is sacred. It is not supposed to be denied. And the most sacred bond of all belongs to the Alpha King. Kale had ruled the Iron Moon for 9 years. He took the throne young, after his father fell in a border war. He was the strongest alpha the pack had seen in 3 generations. Tall, brutal in a fight, a scar down his jaw from a battle he won when everyone said he would lose. But there was something the pack whispered about Kale when he could not hear. He had no mate, and he wanted none. Years before, Kale had watched his own mother fade and die within a season of losing his father. That is what the bond does, you see. When one mate dies, the other often follows. The grief is not just in the heart. It is in the body. Tears at the wolf from the inside. Kale watched that happen. He was 16, and he made a decision that day that he carried like armor ever since. He would never let the bond have that kind of power over him. He would never hand another person the ability to destroy him simply by dying. So he built walls. High ones. He told the council he would choose a queen by strength and politics, not by some pull of the moon. He told them the bond was a weakness a king could not afford. For 9 years, the moon stayed silent. No mate appeared, and Kale told himself he had won. Then came the choosing moon. Once a year, the whole pack gathers in the great hall under the open roof, beneath the full moon, and unbonded wolves stand together to see if the moon will speak. It is mostly a celebration. Young wolves find their mates. There is feasting. There is music. Celine almost did not go. She had a sick child to watch over. But the mother recovered, and an elder told her it was tradition, and so she went. She stood at the back near the door where she always stood, close to the exit, ready to slip out the moment she was needed. She was not looking for a mate. She had stopped expecting 1 year ago, and then the moon rose to its full height, and the pull hit her so hard she had to grab the doorframe to stay standing. Heat, certainty, a line of fire running straight across the room to one man, to the throne, to Kale. The whole hall felt it at the same moment. 100 wolves turned. The king of the Iron Moon, the man who swore he had no mate, the man who built his entire reign on being untouchable, was staring across the room at a healer in a plain dress with a moonstone pendant at her throat. The moon had spoken, and it had chosen her. For one heartbeat, Kale's face cracked open. Everyone saw it. Shock. And under the shock, something that looked almost like hope. And then the walls slammed back down. Because Kale had spent 9 years preparing for exactly this moment. And he had already decided what he would do if it ever came. He would say no. What he had not prepared for was how she would take it. Here is what happened next. And I want you to picture it because the whole pack would talk about it for years. The moon had chosen. The bond was lit. By every law the Iron Moon held, Kale should have crossed that hall, taken Celine's hand, and claimed her before the pack. That is what an alpha does. That is what 9 years of waiting was supposed to end with. Kale did cross the hall. Slowly. Every wolf held their breath. Celine stood very still by the door, her hands still on the frame, her heart slamming against her ribs from the pull of a bond she had wanted her whole life and never thought she would feel. He stopped in front of her. Up close he was enormous. She had to tip her head back to meet his eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. The bond roared between them. Everyone in the room could feel the heat of it. And then Kale spoke, loud enough for the whole hall to hear. There has been a mistake. That was how he started. A mistake. He said the moon had erred. He said a king does not take a healer with no blood, no rank, and no army behind her as his queen. He said the strength of the Iron Moon could not rest on a bond with a woman who set bones for a living. It was cruel. It was meant to be cruel. Cruelty was the fastest way to kill a bond, and Kale wanted it dead before it could take root in him. Then he raised his hand, and he said the words. The formal words. The words that, once spoken by an alpha, cannot easily be taken back. I, Kale, Alpha King of the Iron Moon, reject you as my mate. And he slammed his fist down on the great stone table beside them so hard the whole hall shook. Now, here is the part nobody expected. When an alpha rejects a fated mate, the mate breaks. That is simply what happens. The bond tears, and the pain of it drops them. Rejected mates scream. They fall to their knees. They beg. The whole pack had seen it before with lesser wolves. It is a terrible thing to watch. Most rejected mates plead for the alpha to reconsider. Right there on the floor in front of everyone. The pack braced for it. They expected Celine to crumble. She did not crumble. The bond tore. You could see it hit her. Her face went white. Her hand tightened on the doorframe until her knuckles showed. A sound caught in her throat. For 1 second, the pain of it nearly took her down. And then she straightened up. She let go of the doorframe. She smoothed the front of her plain dress with both hands, slowly, like she was steadying herself. She lifted her chin, and she looked the Alpha King dead in the eyes. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not say a single word about the bond, or the moon, or what he was throwing away. She said only this, quiet, steady, clear enough for the whole room to hear. I accept your rejection. Thank you for being honest in front of your pack. That was all. Thank you for being honest. Believe me, nobody in that hall had ever heard a rejected mate say thank you. Then Celine reached up and touched the moonstone pendant at her throat. Just once, the way some people touch something to remind themselves who they are. She turned around, and she walked out the door she had been standing next to the whole time. No tears, no scene, no backward glance. The door closed behind her with a soft click. And the great hall of the Iron Moon, full of 100 wolves, sat in total silence. Kale stood frozen by the stone table, his fist still resting on the cracked stone, staring at the door she had just walked through. He had won. That was the thing. He had done exactly what he set out to do. He had killed the bond in public, protected his throne, and proven to the whole pack that the King of the Iron Moon could not be moved by the moon or by any woman. He should have felt relief. He told himself he felt relief. The council nodded their approval. The feast resumed, quietly at first, then louder, as wolves pretended the strange moment had not happened. Music started up again. The night went on. Kale returned to his throne. He sat down. Someone handed him a cup of moon water, and he drank it. He answered a question from an elder about the spring patrols. His voice was steady. His hands were steady. The danger had passed. The bond was rejected. The mate was gone. The throne was secure. By every measure he cared about, it was over. He set down the cup. He leaned back in his throne. And for the first time in 9 years, Kale let himself believe he was finally truly free. He had no idea what was coming. Started small. 3 days after the choosing moon, Kale stopped sleeping. At first he blamed the spring patrols. Then he blamed the heat. But on the 4th night he woke up on the floor of his chambers with his claws out and the bed frame torn apart, and no memory of how he got there. His wolf was awake, and his wolf was furious. Here is something Kale had never been told, because no alpha in living memory had been foolish enough to try what he tried. A bond can be rejected, but a true bond, a moon-chosen bond, does not simply die because you say the words. It goes underground, festers, and in an alpha, whose wolf is stronger than any other in the pack, a denied true bond does not break the mate. It breaks him. By the 7th day, Kale could not hold a conversation without his voice dropping into a growl. His eyes stayed black. He shattered a goblet in his fist and did not feel the glass cut him. The pack started to notice. Wolves stepped out of his path. The council started to whisper. And every night, the pull dragged him toward the door Celine had walked out of, like a hook behind his ribs. This is where it turns. On the 9th day, the council called a private session. Elder Mara, the oldest wolf in the pack, stood up and said the thing nobody else would say. She said the king was bond-sick. She said a denied true bond would drive an alpha feral within a moon, maybe less. Feral alpha is not a king. A feral alpha is a danger to every wolf he rules. And pack law was very clear about what happened to an alpha who could no longer control his wolf. He would be challenged and put down. Now the stakes had changed completely. This was no longer a story about a proud king and the woman he turned away. This was about whether Kale would live out the season. The rejection he thought would protect his throne was the very thing about to cost him his throne, his wolf, and his life. And there was worse. Because the council was not the only one paying attention. There was a wolf named Vero, a warlord from the northern reaches, strong, ambitious, and patient. Vero had wanted the Iron Moon throne for years. He had never moved because Kale was unbeatable. But a bond-sick alpha is not unbeatable. Vero heard the whispers, and Vero began to gather wolves to his side, quietly, waiting for the king to be weak enough to fall. The council put it to Kale directly. There was one way to stop the bond sickness. One way only. Complete the bond. Find Celine. Take back the rejection if she would allow it and claim her before the next full moon. And Kale, even now, even dying of it, lifted his black eyes and said no. That was the moment Elder Mara understood how deep his walls really went. He would rather die than be that vulnerable. He would rather lose everything than hand one person the power to destroy him. She told him he was a fool. She told him the woman he rejected had shown more strength walking out that door than he had shown sitting on his throne. Because Celine felt the same bond tear. Celine lost the same thing. And Celine did not fall apart. She accepted it, she thanked him, and she walked away with her head high. That was the line that did it. Something in Kale snapped. He came up off the throne with a roar that shook dust from the rafters. His wolf surfaced fully, claws and fangs and black eyes, and he brought his fist down on the arm of the ancient stone throne and split it clean in two. 100 wolves dropped to the floor and bared their throats on instinct. Elders scattered. The whole hall went dead silent in an instant, every wolf frozen, because the king of the Iron Moon had finally, completely, lost control. And in that silence, breathing hard, half wolf and half man, Kale said the truth out loud for the first time. He said her name. He said it like it was being torn out of him. He said he could not stop seeing her smooth down that plain dress and lift her chin. He said the way she walked away without begging was the only thing in 9 years that had ever gotten past his walls. Anyone who screamed, anyone who begged, he could turn away from. He had built himself to withstand exactly that. But a woman who simply accepted it, thanked him, and left with her dignity intact. He had no defense against that. None. If you have made it this far with me, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because what Cale did next is the part of the story nobody who saw it ever forgot. The moment he said her name out loud, Cale came down off the dais, walked past his shattered throne, past his stunned council, and out the doors of the great hall. The Alpha King was going to find her, and he had no idea if she would even open the door. Selene had not left the territory. That surprised people later when they heard the story. A rejected mate usually runs. There is too much shame in staying. But Selene had a sick child still under her care, and she was not going to abandon a patient because a king had hurt her pride. So she stayed in her small room at the edge of the territory, with the dried herbs and the single candle, and she did her work, and at night she let herself feel the torn place where the bond used to be, and then in the morning she got up and kept going. That is who she was. I told you at the start. When the knock came at her door near midnight, she knew who it was before she opened it. You always know your mate, even a rejected one, especially a rejected one. She opened the door. Cale filled the whole frame. He looked terrible. Hollow eyes, days without sleep, blood dried on his knuckles. The most powerful wolf in 3 generations stood on the step of a healer's cottage looking like a man who had been losing a war inside his own body. For a moment he could not speak. Then the Alpha King of the Iron Moon did something no living wolf had ever seen him do. He went down on one knee. In the doorway, in the dirt, in front of the woman he had rejected, in front of his entire pack, Cale knelt. Selene did not gasp. She did not reach for him. She stood in her doorway with her arms crossed and the candlelight behind her, and she waited. I was wrong, he said. She said nothing. He told her everything then. He told her about his mother, and the season she faded after his father died. He told her about the walls he built at 16. He told her he rejected her not because she was beneath him, but because the bond with her was the strongest thing he had ever felt, and it terrified him because he had spent his whole life making sure nothing could ever have that kind of hold on him again. He told her he was dying of the denied bond. He did not say it to make her pity him. He said it because it was true and he was done lying. And then he said the part that mattered. He said, I am not here because I am dying. If this were only about my life, I would let it take me before I dragged you back into a pack that watched me throw you away. I am here because I cannot stop thinking about the way you left. You felt everything I felt. You lost everything I lost. And you did not break. You thanked me. You walked out with your head high. And I have ruled wolves for 9 years, and I have never once seen strength like that. He looked up at her. You are stronger than me. You always were. I built walls because I was afraid. You did not need them. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I could not see that until you had already walked away. Now, you might expect Selene to fall into his arms here. That is how these stories usually go. She did not. She looked down at the kneeling king for a long moment, and then she said quietly, You rejected me in front of 100 wolves. You called me a healer with no blood and no rank, and you let them all hear it. I know, he said. A kneeling apology in the dark does not undo a public rejection, she said. If you mean this, you do not say it to me here where no one can see. You say it to them. And that is exactly what Cale did. The next morning, under the open sky, he called the entire pack into the great hall. Vero was there, with his gathered wolves, watching for weakness, certain his moment had come at last. Cale stood before all of them, beside his shattered throne, and he told them the truth. He told them he had rejected his fated mate out of fear, not strength. He told them the strongest wolf in the Iron Moon had never been him. It was the woman who walked out of this hall without shedding a tear. Then he turned to Celine, who stood at the back, by the door, the way she always did. And the Alpha King bared his throat to her. Do you understand what that means? In our world, baring the throat is the deepest submission a wolf can offer. An alpha does not bare his throat. An Alpha King never bares his throat. It is the one thing his pride is built to never allow. Kale did it in front of everyone. He tipped his head back and offered his throat to a healer in a plain dress, and he asked her, in front of the whole pack, if she would accept the bond he had thrown away. The hall held its breath, and Vero, watching, understood that he had already lost, because a pack does not turn on a king who is willing to kneel for the truth. They followed him into the fire all over again, right there in that silence. It all came down to Celine. One word, yes or no. Celine let the silence stretch. She was not being cruel. She was deciding. Because here is the thing nobody in that hall understood except her. Saying yes did not erase what had happened. The bond had been torn once already. Reaccepting it would not be a clean, easy thing. It would mean choosing, with her eyes open, to give her heart to the one man who had already broken it in public. She thought about her mother, who wore the moonstone before her, and who used to say that strength is not refusing to be hurt. Strength is choosing what to do after. She walked the length of the great hall. 100 wolves watched her go. She walked past the council, past Vero and his gathered fighters, all the way up to the dais where the king of the Iron Moon stood with his throat bared and his eyes finally clear. And she reached up and touched the moonstone pendant at her throat. Once, the way she always did. Then she said it. I accept. That was all. The same calm voice she used when she accepted his rejection. 2 words then, 2 words now. But everyone in that hall understood the difference. The first time she walked away. This time she stayed. The bond snapped back into place between them so hard that several of the younger wolves stumbled. Kale made a sound like a man who had been holding his breath underwater and finally broke the surface. The black drained out of his eyes. The bond sickness lifted, all at once, like a fever breaking. He did not grab her. He had learned better than that. He waited until she reached out first. And when she finally pressed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart, the strongest alpha in 3 generations closed his eyes and shook. There was no grand celebration that day. That came later, and that is a different story. What mattered happened quietly, the way the important things usually do. Vero left the territory before sundown with his fighters behind him. There was nothing for him there anymore. A pack united behind a king who had knelt for the truth is not a pack you can take. He understood that, and he was gone. The council repaired the cracked stone throne. But Kale ordered them to leave the split in the armrest unmended. He said he wanted to see it every day. He said a king who forgets he is capable of being a fool will become one again. And Celine, the healer with no blood and no rank, she did not move into the royal chambers and put on a crown and forget who she was. She kept her small room at the edge of the territory, with the herbs hanging from the ceiling. She still came when a child burned with fever. She still set bones after a hunt went wrong. She was the queen of the Iron Moon now, and she was also still the woman who stayed when everyone else ran. That never changed about her. That was the whole point. Years later, young wolves would ask the elders how the cold Alpha King, the man who swore he had no mate and never would, ended up bonded to a healer who once walked out of his hall without a single tear. And the elders always told it the same way. They said the king built his whole life around being untouchable. He could withstand any scream. He could turn away from any wolf who begged. He had armored himself against every kind of weakness he could imagine. But he never imagined her. He never imagined that a woman could feel the same bond tear, lose the same future, take the same public humiliation, and simply lift her chin, say thank you, and walk away clean. He had no defense against dignity. None. The one thing that finally got past every wall he ever built was a woman who refused to beg him to love her. She did not fight for him. She did not plead. She just showed him, by walking away, exactly what he had thrown out. And it cost him more than any fight ever could have. Remember how this started. A fist on a stone table. A hall gone silent. A king who thought he had won. He had not won that night. He only thought he had. The night he truly won was the night he stopped trying to. The night he knelt in the dirt, bared his throat to a healer in a plain dress, and let himself be seen. And the woman who walked away without begging. She is the one who taught him how.